Evan Hartley had always considered himself someone who could read people easily, yet lately he felt confused even by the person who slept beside him. His 4-year relationship with Daniel Lowe had slowly lost the warmth it once carried, leaving only routine stitched together by habit and half-finished conversations. Every morning Daniel rushed to work without so much as a glance, and every evening he returned home distracted, exhausted, or distant. Evan tried to interpret the silence, but all he found were questions that kept multiplying. Still, he tried to believe the relationship wasn't over. He tried to believe he simply needed to be patient. Yet even patience had begun to feel like a burden he carried alone. The one unexpected place Evan had found comfort was through 2 friends he had met months earlier at an international art workshop, Kwame Obesai from Ghana and Liam Ndlovu from South Africa. They had arrived at the workshop with confident smiles that made the whole room brighter. Kwame spoke softly but with an assured grace that made people naturally listen. Liam, on the other hand, radiated a cheerful energy that made any space feel safer. They had an openness to them that made Evan feel seen in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. Their bond had deepened through shared sketches, long discussions about color theory, and the kind of laughter that dissolves tension. After the workshop ended, they stayed in touch through late-night voice calls and spontaneous messages that always seemed to arrive whenever Evan was struggling with loneliness at home. Daniel noticed the frequent notifications, and although he never said it outright, Evan sensed the prick of jealousy in the clipped tone Daniel used whenever he asked who was calling. When Kwame and Liam messaged him saying they were visiting the city for a weekend and wanted to meet, Evan's heart lifted in a way he tried not to overthink. They suggested a drive to a calm, secluded place outside the city, somewhere peaceful where they could catch up without noise or interruptions. Evan loved the idea, imagining open skies and an escape from the suffocating atmosphere at home. Daniel, however, didn't share his excitement. "I'm not going," he said flatly when Evan invited him. "You can go if you want, but don't expect me to entertain your little workshop friends." The words stung more than Evan admitted. He didn't argue, though. He had learned that arguments rarely changed anything. Instead, he simply nodded, grabbed his backpack, and stepped out into the late afternoon sun where Kwame and Liam were waiting by their rented car. Liam greeted him with his usual warmth, pulling him into a quick hug. "You look tired," he said with a concerned smile. "We're getting you out of the city before it eats you alive." Kwame chuckled softly. "He's exaggerating, but he's not entirely wrong. You need a break." Evan slid into the back seat as they drove off, the city buildings gradually thinning behind them. For a while they talked lightly, about art, old workshop memories, and the differences in weather between their home countries. Yet beneath the casual conversation, Evan felt a growing warmth inside him, something he hadn't felt in months, the comfort of being understood without explanations. As they drove farther from the city, the scenery shifted into long stretches of quiet road with tall, whispering grass flanking both sides. The sky expanded overhead in broad strokes of fading gold and soft lavender. The peacefulness was a balm Evan hadn't known he needed so badly. Still, as the roads emptied and the sounds of the city faded entirely, subtle threads of suspense wove through the atmosphere. The place they were heading wasn't dangerous, nothing about Kwame or Liam suggested recklessness, but the isolation made the moment feel strangely significant, as if they were on the edge of an important revelation. Evan tried to ignore the buzzing of his phone. Daniel had called twice already, and Evan chose not to answer. He didn't want to cut short the rare feeling of calm settling over him. He knew Daniel would be annoyed, but the thought exhausted him rather than frightened him. Eventually, Kwame turned down a narrow dirt path that led to a quieter area beside a slow-moving river. The water reflected the sky with a mirror-like stillness, broken only by occasional ripples from the breeze. No people were anywhere in sight, only a wide open space surrounded by tall trees and a sense of deep tranquility. "This place is beautiful," Evan said quietly as he stepped out of the car. The words drifted into the cool air as if carried on the wind. Liam walked ahead toward the riverbank, stretching his arms as though embracing the open sky. "We figured you could use somewhere peaceful. Somewhere without pressure." Kwame remained beside Evan, watching him with a thoughtful expression. "Evan," he said gently, "we didn't bring you here just to relax." His tone wasn't ominous, but it carried a gravity that made Evan's pulse lift slightly. Evan frowned, unsure what to say. Did something happen? Kwame exchanged a glance with Liam, who turned back toward them, his earlier playfulness replaced by concern. The shift in energy made the air feel heavier, as if the quiet landscape itself was holding its breath. We've been wanting to tell you something, Liam said. But we wanted to do it somewhere you'd feel safe. Evan swallowed. The word safe lingered in his mind uncomfortably. Tell me what? He asked, forcing steadiness into his voice. Kwame placed a hand on Evan's shoulder, steady, reassuring. We didn't bring you here by accident, he said. There's something you need to hear, something about your relationship. The world seemed to pause for a heartbeat that Evan's breath caught in his chest. His fingers curled slightly at his sides, not in fear but in the growing awareness that something in his life was about to shift, maybe something he'd been avoiding without realizing it. Liam stepped closer, his expression soft but serious. We didn't want to worry you. But we can't stay silent anymore. The river flowed quietly behind them, a low, constant whisper that contrasted sharply with the sudden tension pressing around Evan. He felt rooted to the ground, bracing himself without knowing why. Just tell me, he finally said, voice quiet but steady. Whatever it is. I'm listening. Kwame nodded once, slowly, as though preparing himself to continue, and the section ends right there, on the cusp of the truth, with the air thick with unspoken words and Evan's future poised to tilt in an unexpected direction. The silence that followed Evan's request felt long enough to bend the air around them. Kwame drew a slow breath, as though choosing each word carefully before releasing it. Evan, he began, we didn't plan to interfere in your personal life. But something came to our attention, and we couldn't ignore it. Liam stepped beside him, his expression gentler, as if he feared the impact of whatever they were about to reveal. We wouldn't say anything unless we were certain, he added softly. Evan felt the uneasiness settle into his stomach like a heavy stone. The stillness of the riverside, which moments ago had felt soothing, now felt ominous. Just tell me, he said, although his voice sounded distant, as if he'd pushed it out from somewhere far beneath his ribs. Kwame met Evan's gaze. Someone from the workshop reached out to me last week. Her name is Janelle. She used to work with Daniel at his previous firm. Evan stiffened at the mention of Daniel's old workplace. And? Kwame exhaled slowly. She said Daniel has been spending a lot of time with someone he met there. More time than he ever admitted to you. A sharp ache pierced Evan's chest. He instantly thought of the late evenings, the vague explanations, the way Daniel looked away whenever Evan asked how his day had gone. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. Are you saying he's cheating? Liam shook his head quickly. We're not talking about anything physical. As far as we know, it hasn't reached that. But, it's emotional. At least from what Janelle saw. They text often. They go out for lunch together. They sit close during meetings. And Daniel talks about him, a lot. Him? Evan asked, stunned by the detail. Kwame nodded gently. A colleague named Aaron. Hearing the name was like being struck. Evan pressed his fingers to his forehead as the truth settled into his bones. The signs had been there, scattered across months, missed conversations, half-hearted apologies, excuses that didn't feel like excuses until now. He had always feared that Daniel's distance had a source, but he'd convinced himself the distance was his own creation, the product of overthinking. Liam stepped closer and placed a steadying hand on Evan's back. We're telling you because you deserve honesty. Not confusion. Not silence. Evan let out a shaky breath. I thought I was the problem. I thought maybe I wasn't doing enough. No, Kwame said firmly, his voice calm but resolute. This is not on you. Relationships struggle, sure, but secrets make struggle unbearable. Evan's vision blurred briefly as the river shimmered through his tears. He blinked them away, embarrassed despite the fact that both men had seen him vulnerable before. The weight of the revelation pressed relentlessly against his chest. Why didn't Daniel tell me? He whispered. Maybe he's scared, Liam said, stepping around to face him. Maybe he's confused. But that doesn't excuse hiding something that affects you directly. Evan tried to breathe evenly, focusing on the quiet rustling of leaves overhead. He felt exposed, as if layers of certainty had been peeled away all at once. The place they'd brought him wasn't dangerous, but the truth they'd delivered had carved through him with a silent, unforgiving edge. Kwame crouched beside him, his voice low and steady. "We didn't bring you here to hurt you, Evan. We brought you here so you wouldn't face this alone. We care about you," Liam added. "More than you probably realize." The sincerity in their words warmed Evan even through the ache. He looked at them both, two friends who had no obligation to worry about him, yet chose to anyway. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know what to do next." "You don't have to decide today," Kwame said. "You just need clarity. If you want to talk to Daniel, do it when you're ready. Not because he pressures you, not because you feel guilty, because you deserve answers." Evan nodded slowly, trying to gather the scattered pieces of his thoughts. He felt raw, but beneath the pain there was also an undeniable sense of relief. The uncertainty that had lived inside him for so long finally had a shape, and knowing, even painfully, was easier than wondering. His phone vibrated again. This time, he checked the screen. Daniel had sent several messages, each shorter and more urgent than the last. "Where are you? Answer me that we need to talk, Evan, please," and finally, "I know you're with them. I know where you are." A tremor ran through him, not out of fear, but from the sudden realization that this moment was no longer isolated. Daniel was stepping into it, whether Evan was ready or not. Liam frowned slightly as he read the shift in Evan's expression. "What did he say?" Evan handed them the phone. Kwame's eyebrows lifted subtly. Liam's mouth tightened in concern. "He's coming," Evan said quietly. Kwame stood, his posture calm but alert. "If he wants to talk, let him talk. But we'll be right here. You won't face him alone." Evan nodded, though the anticipation tightening in his chest made it difficult to breathe easily. He didn't want a confrontation, but he knew one was coming. And maybe it was overdue. They moved closer to the riverbank, where the sky had begun to deepen into a soft twilight blue. The cool breeze brushed Evan's cheeks, grounding him in the moment. Beside him, Liam and Kwame stood like quiet pillars of support. Evan stared at the rippling water, letting its steady rhythm calm him. The truth had landed hard, but he wasn't collapsing under it. If anything, something inside him was awakening, an insistence that he deserved honesty, deserved clarity, deserved more than the hollow spaces Daniel had left in their relationship. Footsteps cracked faintly on the gravel path behind them. Evan didn't turn yet. He let the sound grow nearer, each step confirming what the final message had already warned. Daniel was coming. Kwame glanced at Evan, offering a silent nod of reassurance. Liam exhaled softly, positioning himself on Evan's right as if forming a protective triangle around him. Evan straightened, gathering every remaining thread of composure. He didn't know how the conversation would go. He didn't know what Daniel would admit or deny. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity: the truth was already here, and running from it was no longer an option. And just as the last echo of footsteps reached them, Evan finally turned. The section ends at the brink of confrontation, with the weight of revelation settling into the quiet evening air. The footsteps stopped a few meters away, and Evan turned fully to see Daniel standing at the edge of the clearing. His expression was a complicated mix of worry, frustration, and something Evan could no longer name: guilt, perhaps, or maybe the faint edge of desperation. The river shimmered between them, calm and indifferent, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that threatened to spill over. Evan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He could sense Daniel's presence, but he also felt the unwavering support of Kwame and Liam flanking him. They hadn't moved forward aggressively or demanded confrontation, they simply stood with him, ready to shield him emotionally if needed. That silent loyalty gave Evan the courage to face the man who had, for so long, hidden pieces of himself from him. Daniel's gaze flicked to Kwame and Liam before returning to Evan. "I didn't know. I didn't mean for this to," he began, his voice faltering. There was a pause, a moment where Evan could almost believe that the man in front of him was struggling with sincerity. quiet but firm, stepped slightly forward. Daniel, you've already made your choices. Don't waste energy defending what's been done. Just be honest. Evan felt a rush of gratitude for the words. They were measured, truthful, and somehow easier to bear than any shouted accusation could have been. He stepped a fraction closer, his own voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Daniel, I know. I know about Aaron. I know what's been happening. You don't have to lie or explain anything anymore. Daniel flinched, as if the truth had struck him physically. His jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed lost. Then, finally, the words came, hesitant and low. I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt alone. I didn't know how to tell you, Evan. I didn't know how to fix it. Evan listened, the ache in his chest a familiar weight, but he also felt clarity settling in. For years he had thought silence and distance were his fault. Now he realized it had never been solely about him. It had been about choices, about the gaps in a relationship neither of them had addressed. And the choice he faced now was his own. I needed you to see me, Daniel, he said quietly. Not just know I was here. I needed connection, attention, honesty. And I wasn't getting it. Daniel swallowed hard. I know. I should have, he trailed off, unable to find the words to repair what had already fractured. Evan exhaled slowly. It's too late to fix what's broken between us. But it's not too late for me to take care of myself. The words hung in the air, firm and resolute. Daniel's expression faltered, a mixture of regret and understanding flickering across his face. He took a step back, finally accepting the truth Evan had spoken, the truth that he could no longer deny. Kwame placed a reassuring hand on Evan's shoulder. You're making the right choice. You're choosing clarity, respect, and honesty, for yourself. That's what matters. Liam's voice was softer, but no less earnest. We'll stand with you, Evan. Whatever comes next, you won't face it alone. Evan looked at his friends, their presence steady and unwavering. He realized that the emotional bond he had feared was inappropriate or complicated was, instead, the kind of support he had been missing in his life. Not a replacement for love, but a reminder that love could be patient, respectful, and understanding. That realization brought an unexpected sense of calm amid the emotional chaos. Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of his own actions now evident in his posture. I wish I could take it back, he murmured. I never wanted to hurt you. Evan nodded, his gaze softening despite everything. I know. But wanting isn't enough. Actions matter. And I need to move forward, without hiding from what I feel or ignoring what I deserve. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't argue. He didn't try to beg or sway him. Instead, he nodded slowly, finally seeming to accept Evan's decision. I understand, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. I'm sorry, Evan. Truly. The apology, while meaningful, wasn't enough to alter the outcome. Evan felt a mixture of relief and grief, emotions intertwined in the complicated tangle of letting go. But he also felt a growing sense of liberation, a recognition that he no longer had to carry the weight of unanswered questions or hidden betrayals. That he turned slightly toward Kwame and Liam, grateful for their unwavering presence. Thank you, he said simply. For being here. For not leaving me to face this alone. Kwame smiled, a calm and steady expression that seemed to fill the empty clearing with warmth. You didn't have to ask. That's what friends do. That's what we wanted to do. Liam added, a faint smile curving his lips, and we'll keep being here, Evan. Not to pressure you, not to rush you, but to support you. Always. Evan felt the truth in their words resonate deeply. In that quiet, deserted place, he finally understood that love and support didn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and patient, something he had been yearning for but hadn't realized until now. As the last light of the sun began to fade behind the trees, Evan allowed himself a deep, unguarded breath. The river mirrored the soft colors of twilight, and for the first time in months, he felt a sense of inner clarity. He didn't know what the future would bring, and he didn't need to. What mattered was the moment he stood in now, aware, unafraid, and surrounded by those who truly cared. Daniel's silhouette retreated slowly toward the road, a silent acknowledgement that their paths had diverged. Evan didn't call after him. There was nothing more to say, not now, not in this space. The confrontation had come, and he had faced it with honesty, courage, and dignity. Kwame and Liam fell into step beside him as they walked back toward the car. Neither spoke immediately, words weren't needed. The quiet understanding between them filled the space, heavier and more meaningful than any conversation could have been. Evan felt a small smile tug at the corners of his mouth, the first in a long time that hadn't been tinged with worry or doubt. When they reached the car, Liam opened the door for Evan. "Whenever you're ready," he said, "we'll keep moving forward. No pressure. Just, together, in whatever way you need." Evan nodded, gripping the edge of the door for balance, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. Kwame's steady presence beside him reminded him that support and connection didn't always come wrapped in romance or obligation, they could exist simply in care, understanding, and patience. As they drove back toward the city under the slowly deepening night sky, Evan felt the weight of recent events settle into a strange, almost peaceful equilibrium. The revelation of Daniel's emotional betrayal had been painful, but the act of facing it, of being honest with himself and supported by his friends, had given him a new sense of direction. For the first time in months, he realized that moving forward didn't have to be complicated. Clarity, honesty, and the quiet presence of those who cared for him were enough to light a path out of the darkness he had been living in. Evan exhaled slowly, watching the streetlights blur past in a gentle rhythm. He didn't know what awaited him tomorrow, next week, or next month. But in this moment, he felt grounded. He had faced the truth, claimed his voice, and chosen himself. And as the car rolled on through the quiet streets, the deserted riverside clearing receded behind them, not as a place of fear or suspense, but as a turning point. A space where Evan had confronted the complexities of love, loyalty, and personal integrity, and where he had finally taken the first step toward his own emotional freedom. The night embraced them, calm and infinite, carrying the promise of new beginnings, subtle hope, and the knowledge that, no matter what came next, Evan would never again have to face the truth alone.